West of the Mississippi, there are places to be found where life, it seems, has changed little from the days of the Old West. These towns, with their histories largely forgotten to the outside world, beckon with the call of the desert wind, waiting to woo you with the shadows of their mountains. Hey sightseers, Sightseeing Sally here, and
Marty.
We finally made it off the mountains, and we're down in
Magdalena,
which is a small town here in New Mexico, an old mining town that is. We thought we'd walk around and check it out and see what kind of history we can discover along the way.
Check it out.
Originally called Pueblo Springs, modern-day Magdalena got its start thanks to the mining that began in nearby Kelly. By 1884, the town was large enough for a post office. Shortly after, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad built a spur allowing ore from the Kelly mines to be shipped from Magdalena to the smelters in Socorro. For those of you who don't know, Magdalena is approximately 3 miles or so north of Kelly, where we were just at, and we're coming up on one of the old buildings here in town. If I'm not mistaken, it's the old jail or the old sheriff's office for the marshal. Or at least the sign on it leads you to believe that it's that. Looks like Marty's peeking in windows again. Just kidding, he doesn't do that. Can you see anything in there?
Yeah, you can see the old jail. Two cells.
Kind of reminds me of Marshal Dillon's office on Gunsmoke. And then it looks like directly across the street from the old jail is a place called Casa Javelina. According to its sign, it looks like you can rent it by the day or the week, and it happens to be a renovated old ghost town building, otherwise known as a Rosedale ghost town house. I wonder if that means it's haunted, or if it came from a ghost town by the name of Rosedale. Mining isn't the only thing that brought money to the town. In fact, Magdalena was known as a huge ranching center, and we'll get into that more a little bit later in the video because there's some important history related to that here. But first, I thought I'd show you what modern day Magdalena looks like looking down Highway 60. You can see that they have a bank in town, a library, there's a museum, cemetery, typical stuff you'd find in a small town. You can see that at one time this over here probably was a greenhouse, because if you read the sign, it says bedding plants. And then next to that is this interesting looking building that says Studio 605. Might have been a coffee shop at some point. And it looks like there's an old printing press inside. I don't know. I'm thinking it's old. You can't see it very well because of the reflection on the glass, but it does say Heidelberg. Original Heidelberg cylinder on it, so who knows. The sign up above does say that it is letterpress, photo press, creative press, so I don't know, what are they doing in there? Wish it was open, I could find out. The thing is we're probably here in the off season, I'm assuming, because we're farther up in altitude, and it is winter, as evidenced by the snow on the ground, that some of these places aren't open just because it's not tourist season. And then you can see across the highway there is the fire station and a few other buildings. There's a gas station way over there. It's my understanding from what I read online that most of the townsfolk here either work in Socorro which is, I want to say, probably 20 miles down the road that way, or maybe in some of the other towns around. There's probably some of them doing work from home stuff, plus then the businesses that are here. They do host a number of yearly festivals here, one of them being the Old Timers Reunion, which I think has to do with people that used to live or work up in the mines, like the Kelly mine site. But I may have that confused with something else. And then, of course, there's the Frontier Festival that they put on here. Even though it might look like on the surface there's not a whole lot going on here these days, in reality, I think the people here would beg to differ. Quite a few festivals for a little town. You don't always see that up in Wisconsin. Well, okay, I lied. We do see that up in Wisconsin because every time there's a chance that people can celebrate and drink, up there they do. But I digress, because we're not talking about people here in Wisconsin. We're talking about the folks here in Magdalena, New Mexico. To my right is that gas station that I had mentioned that you could see from afar. And then directly in front of me is what's now called the Indian Mercantile, but it is originally known as Salome's or Salome's store and warehouse, built by, I believe, two brothers, Joe and George, established their business back in 1910. And then, according to what I had read online, the store that's standing now was built in 1911. I think there was a fire that destroyed the first building, and then they rebuilt on the same site. And it's my understanding that at one time you could go in and see the original cash counter that was used in the store, and an antique bench, and surprisingly, a glass case that was used to store wedding gowns. Because, of course, this was a store, a mercantile type business, you would have been able to find just about everything in here, and that would have included dresses for women getting married. And then, of course, there's this shady character. Got anything to say for yourself?
Nope.
How we don't have more police officers stopping us as we're going about these small towns is anybody's wonder. But surprisingly, we don't. Moving along, if you look out there, you can see the mountain range that the town is named after. Most sources state the mountains were named by the Spanish, who claimed to have seen the face of Mary Magdalene in the side of one of the mountain peaks. Another version claims it was actually a Kelly miner who detected her profile. Regardless, the Native Americans long recognized the enchanted face of a woman in the side of the mountain, believing the mountain to be full of magic, and reportedly never killing any white men under her watchful gaze. The house you see in front of me is probably one of the most elaborate homes that was built here. Started in 1909 and finished in 1910, this home was built by John S. McTavish, and it was used as a place for housing both his family and travelers that came to town. And it was known to have a coal bin inside it, large enough to hold a rail car load of anthracite coal that came all the way from Pennsylvania. Now on the National Register of Historic Places. I wonder if they still have it inside the basement or if they got rid of it. And then next door to the McTavish house is the McTavish Blackburn house, which is believed to be the oldest surviving home in town. Believed to be built sometime before 1887, the McTavishes bought it in the 1890s and lived in it until their dream home was built. I know one thing, I don't care where you are in town, the views here are just simply amazing. Now, if you're wondering if there are any notable characters from Magdalena's early history, there are, and we're going to explore one of them more closely, and that is Grandma Butter. If you're wondering who Grandma Butter was, Grandma Butter's real name was Marie Butterfield. She was a nurse here, arriving in the late 1920s. She bought an old adobe home that was built sometime after 1915. Later, she added a wing of quaint knotty pine rooms. Oh, I think that was about 1956. You can see them over here. And really what's notable about Grandma Butter is that she turned her home into a hospital. It was called a laying-in hospital. Basically, it was a hospital for expectant mothers.
Place for mothers to pump out their kids.
I sometimes have no clue where he comes up with that crap, but I guess that's one way of putting it. Basically, what she did was provide a safe place for women who lived out on the ranches to give birth. For a mere $5 per day, plus a $25 delivery fee, women came as far away as Reserve, New Mexico, to give birth at the hands of Grandma Butter. Grandma Butter basically ran this place all by herself, with the exception of the women that came here. When they were done giving birth, they would stay on for a few weeks with their infants and help out with the cooking, the cleaning, and all that. Often working all shifts alone, it is said that Grandma Butter rarely slept, taking cat naps in her old rocker. At some point, Grandma Butter added on another room as she took in her aunt who was sick with TB. She came out here to get the cure, I think is how they put it. And then when her aunt passed away, she decided that it was time to add a doctor to the staff. And so that room became the doctor's office, and the back porch was enclosed for the doctor to live in. Now, as you can see, Grandma Butter's place is the site of the Western Motel and RV Park. Grandma Butter, by the way, is buried in the town cemetery. If we get a chance to get over there before it gets too dark, we will. And then across the street you can see what used to be the Ponderosa restaurant. If you look on the side of the building, you can see it used to say cafe, and a few other words I can't quite make out because the sun has faded it. Over here is the official Magdalena Visitor Center. It happens to be closed, otherwise I'd bring you over there. But I can show you a few of the old artifacts that they have sitting here. There's an old clapboard wagon, a miner's cart, a couple of old vehicles, not sure if those are Model Ts or Model A's sitting there. Another old mining cart. Here's a better look at the old car. It looks like an old truck maybe. And then there's this one here. You can see the old springs of the seat that once was there. And then what's left of the steering wheel. Like I said, there's really no place in town where you have a bad view. It's just so cool with the mountains all around you. You're just down in this little valley and you can see snow-covered mountains. I don't know. Personally, I really find this town very quaint. I love it. I just think it's the coolest little town out here in New Mexico. This here is the location of the very first rodeo in the United States. Or at least that's what they say. That's what they claim, is that the first rodeo happened here in Magdalena, New Mexico. Mining brought life to this little community, and cattle drives kept it going. At least for a time it did. Between 1885 and 1971, thousands of cattle and sheep were driven into town via the Hoof Highway, the official livestock driveway that ran from Springerville, Arizona to Magdalena. Arriving here, sheep and cattle boarded the awaiting train to be taken elsewhere for slaughter. Now that interstate trucking is the norm, cattle drives are a thing of the past. A lot of historic buildings still intact, like the hotel you see in front of us. The Historic Hall Hotel, it officially opened December 14th, 1917. It's the only original large hotel that still stands here in town. And according to what I read, its exterior walls is 3 bricks thick. Quite impressive. From this angle, you can see just how massive the building is. And for the most part, this is what your view would be looking out your window. Moving along, we're going to head on over to Main Street. There's just so much to see in this little town. So many cute little homes, historic buildings, like I said. Just love this place. This town is a true time capsule. Just sitting here under the watchful eye of Mary Magdalene. Speaking of historic, this is the old Hayes house. What was unique about this building is that the upstairs could only be accessed with an outdoor staircase, which I believe would have been right there. It's only been in more modern times that an interior staircase was added. It was once the place of Dr. McCreary's offices and hospital.
From about 1907 to the late 1920s.
Over here on Main Street, we have modern-day Magdalena's marshal's office, which ironically happens to be behind the old jail.
And we got the neighborhood watch over here.
Poor guys sound like they're about to have a conniption. And then keeping with the town's atmosphere, they have these tiny lanterns hanging here in the middle. Before I go any further, I have a couple of shout outs to give. I want to give a special thanks to Tim Murphy and Jennifer Thompson for becoming our latest patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much. We appreciate your generosity in helping us get out to film these awesome places across America. Now getting back to the history and town of Magdalena. Now here's something I wasn't expecting to see. It looks like an old ambulance, one you would see in the movie or TV show MASH, except it's painted white instead of green. The town was most prosperous from 1884 to 1925, which is during the time when this building was built. Obviously, you can see that it was once the bank, but it was also a drugstore at one point, the front part having built in 1908. And this part having been added on in about 1913.
I'd love to have that old sign. You can see it said Evitts and Darrow's in neon, and so is the check mark. Love that old sign though.
Oh, that's cool. You can see an old sign that was painted on the side of that building. Looks like we made it to the cemetery just in time because the sun is starting to set behind me. And unfortunately, because I don't know the exact location of Marie Butterfield's grave, just gonna have to tell you that she's buried somewhere here in the cemetery. If we had more time, I'd try finding it. But the cemetery is quite large. There's a lot of graves here. A lot more than I expected. And because her headstone lays flat on the ground, it's going to be nearly impossible to find it in the amount of time we have. Because there's one more stop I want to make here in Magdalena that's important to its history that I wanted to show you. So we're just going to move on. In 1958, the Bureau of Indian Affairs built a boarding school for Indian children here in Magdalena. These are the buildings that are left over from that. You can see the old playground equipment that the children would have played on at one time. The school was open for almost 20 years. It was closed in '74 after policies changed with the Bureau. Kind of interesting that it just sits here empty. If you ever find yourself cruising along Highway 60, head to the trail's end. There you'll discover the magic of a town that to this day sits under the watchful eye of the Lady on the Mountain.